Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today we'll be talking about Git submodules, why you should use them and how to use them. If this is your very first time on my channel here, firstly, subscribe, and secondly, you're welcome. On my space here, I share things around tech, I talk about career, and I talk about life. And in the first video on my channel, I gave an introduction as to what to expect here and a little about myself. So if you're interested, you can check out that video. And then down to what we have for today, Git submodules. And I've outlined what we'll be covering. The first on the list is what is a Git submodule, then use cases of Git submodules, how to create a Git submodule using Git submodules in your project, cloning a project with Git submodules, things to watch out for when using Git submodules, and conclusion. So firstly, what is a Git submodule? A Git submodule is a feature of Git that allows you to manage a Git project inside of another Git project. And here's what I mean. Let's say you have repository A and you have repository B, and for some reasons you want to use the code or the files in repository B inside of repository A. Now, the first process you think of is to copy and paste. So you can go to the project for repository B, copy and paste such files into repository A locally on your machine. Now, while that can also work, that can be strenuous because sometimes you may forget. Say you make changes to repository B, you may forget to copy and paste. And even the process of copying and pasting doesn't seem like a nice idea. With Git submodules, instead of copying and pasting, you can have, let's say you have project A for repository A and you have repository B. You can have a subdirectory in project A. You can call that project B. Project B is a subdirectory inside of project A. So project B can serve as a submodule which is pointed to the repository B. And as a submodule, it's like a Git project on its own, a Git initialized project on its own. So project B can push changes to project A, to repository B. Project B can manage its own commits with repository B. Project B can also pull changes from repository B. So instead of copying and pasting from repository B to repository A, all you're doing is you are pulling from repository B, and then those files in repository B would be downloaded in the project B directory. So in your project A, you can use any of those files, any of those shared logic, anything you want. So this way now, you have your project A doing what it's supposed to do, and you have your project B directory pulling the changes accordingly. That's what submodules are. So like I said, they allow you to manage Git inside of Git. Now let's look at the use cases of Git submodules. So the first case which you may have thought of is, say you're working on, this was actually the use case I had before I discovered Git submodules. So I was working on 3 projects at once, and I discovered that these 3 projects, they had shared logic, they had shared functions, they had shared APIs. So I found myself always making changes in project A, and then I'll copy that change, go to project B, I'll copy that change, go to project C. Like, I had a couple of similar files, and it just dawned on me that I should look for a simpler way to manage all of this, like just have a one location where I can store all of this. The first idea I had was npm, but you know, the caveat with using npm, in as much as it can work, is that for every change I make to those shared files, I would have to update the package version, because npm of course doesn't allow the same version for updated packages. So I would have to update the version number, then I would have to publish to npm, and then I'll have to pull, change version number, push, pull. That doesn't look so nice to me. So I had to look for something else, and then I found Bit. So Bit, in my own experience, in as much as it could do what I want, because Bit is like a library that allows you to have collection of files, collection of, it's just like Git, it manages versions too, but this way it's just like a store where you can manage your shared items. My challenge with Bit was the free tier only allowed me to have one collection. So what if I had different collections, like an API collection, utility collection, components collection? I would have to pay, and I wasn't ready for that. So while making my research, I found Git Submodules. So this way, I had these 3 projects, and I had a folder which I called shared. So this shared folder was a Git submodule that was pointing to the shared repository. So in that repository, I had my shared APIs, my shared functions, everything I wanted shared. So project A, project B, and project C, they had this shared folder, which is a Git submodule. And whenever I make changes, like in project A, I could make a change to that shared folder, and once I push that change to the shared repository, project B and project C can also pull those changes. So the very first use case is, say you have shared logic and you want to share it across various projects. Git submodules would be a very nice idea. Another use case is, the use cases can be numerous, but it all revolves around trying to extract code from an external repository. So instead of copying and pasting, then you go for Git submodules. Now that we know what Git submodules are and why we should use them, we'll be looking at a small Git project to learn how to create Git submodules. So basically, we'll be having a submodule that points to another repository, can push and pull changes from that repository. Let's check it out. Okay, the first thing we have to do is create our project folder, and I'll call this submodule tutorial. Then you change your directory to the submodule tutorial. Now this submodule tutorial project is going to hold its own files, its own content, and then it's going to hold Git submodules. So to make this project folder a valid Git project, then we have to initialize Git. And once you can try viewing this on VS Code or any IDE of your choice. And this is what we have. We have the Git directory, which is the default directory that appears when you initialize Git, but this doesn't have any file of its own, so let's create one, readme. And inside of our file, we can have how to create Git Submodule, just some content. Back in our terminal, git status, and we have our new file, and we could just commit that, add readme. So now we have this small project, submodule tutorial, and it has its own file, which is the readme. Now let's create a submodule. And for you to create a submodule, you must have an existing valid Git repository. And when you have that, you can use this command, git submodule add the remote URL and the submodule name. So this remote URL is going to be the Git URL from the repository that you want to have as a submodule. I'll be using Gatsby Remark Liquid Tags, which is one of my packages. So to get the remote URL, just the same way you would clone a repository, you get it from here, copy. Back in your terminal, you can change the remote URL, paste, which is the remote URL, and then the submodule name. This is an optional argument. If you do not add a submodule name, the submodule's name is going to be defaulted by Gatsby Remark Liquid Tags. But since that's a bit long for me, I can change that to shared, or I can just change that to tags. By creating the submodule, it clones into that repository, and then it creates a folder called tags. In our IDE, this is a folder, the tags directory. But when you go back to Git status, it doesn't see tags as a directory. instead it sees it as a submodule. So in our IDE and in our project, we can interact with tags as a directory, which is holding the content it pulled from the Gatsby Remark Liquid tags. But for the parent directory, which is submodule tutorial, it sees tags as a Git module. So on cloning that, on creating that submodule, we have the .git modules file, and this holds all the submodules that are used in our project. And so far we have added only one. So the submodule name is tags, the path is tags, which is just at the root here, and then this is the remote URL. And then we have the tags directory holding everything that it pulled from the Gatsby Remark Liquid tags. So over here we have .github src test editor config, and over here we have .github src test editor config. So we can see here tags is a submodule, and as tags is a submodule, that means it's a Git project on its own, which means we can go into tags, we can run git status, we can confirm the remote URL, which is pointing to liquid tags, we can push. Of course, we haven't made any commit yet, so everything is up to date. And we can also pull. Since the repository has not been updated yet, everything is up to date. So tags is a submodule, a Git project, and you can perform every of Git operations inside of it. You can check the last commit, update package version. As you'd see here, update package version. Now to further test, let's create, since this project is live already and I want to push something, then I can just create a branch to testing module. Remember, we're still in the tags directory, which is a submodule. We have created this, and let's add a new file called testing.md, and in it we'll just have the text testing. When you open tags, you'd find the new file, which is testing.md. And when you run git status, we have our new file, testing.md. This is untracked because Git doesn't know that this file exists yet. Now, the beautiful thing here is we are still in the tags directory. When we head back to the parent directory and we do git status, you can see that here Git knows that there is an untracked content inside of the tags submodule. It doesn't have full information about what is tracked, what is untracked, what has been committed, what has been staged. The parent directory doesn't know of that. But the submodule, as we saw above, it knew that there was untracked files, there were untracked files, and this was one of the untracked files. So as we'd see, the parent directory doesn't have full information about the Git submodule. It only knows where something is added, a new commit has been made. It's left for the Git submodules to commit those new changes, to push or to pull. And when we go back to tags, we can add the new change. We can commit new file. And when we go back to the parent directory and run git status, now you can see that the parent directory is informed or is aware that there are new commits in the tags submodule. It doesn't know what has been committed yet, but all it knows is that there are new commits there. And now we can add this and add and update submodule. Furthermore, we can go back to the tags directory. Since we have our new commit, which is the new file, we can push this to the testing module branch in remote. And right here we can see that we have indeed pushed to this repository from another Git project. And once we merge this on master, any other project that has this Gatsby Remark Liquid tags as its submodule when it runs git pull, it will pull the new changes. So I believe now you can see how we are sharing logic using one repository as the source of truth and then sharing that among every other project. And like I said, you can have multiple submodules. So you can go back, git submodule add EaseJet. So this is another package of mine, and we can copy the remote URL, come back here, paste it. I don't need to change the submodule name. I'm okay with this. Back in our ID, you can see that the Git submodules now has two submodules. One is tags and the other is EaseGit. And then EaseGit also cloned the repository contents and stored them in the EaseGit directory. Similar to tags, we can go into the EaseGit, make changes, push, and pull. And back to the main project, Git status. There's a new module, and we can add that. Commit add new submodule. As we have said in that tutorial, we have seen how to create Git submodules and also how to use Git submodules. So we could go into the submodule directory, we could manage Git inside of it, we could pull, we could make commit, we could create our own branches, we could push to the repository. And just like I said, if there was any other project that was using the Gatsby Remark Liquid tags as a submodule, once the project runs git pull inside of the submodule, it will pull these new changes that we have pushed, including the branches. So we can manage branches across every of this project, and then we can have this Remark Liquid tags as the main source of truth, which means every of our shared logic can be in this Remark Liquid tags, and every of this project will benefit from it. The next on our outline is how to clone projects with submodules. Back in our terminal, I'm going to head to GitHub to create a new repository. And I'll call that submodule tutorial. No description, it's public, none of these, create repository. And I can copy the remote URL. And I can add the URL here. So I can push all my commits to master. And then on refreshing the submodule tutorial repository, we would notice some interesting things. So the git modules is a file, the readme is a file, but then these are submodules. They are not files, neither it's a submodule file. They are not directories. Now when we click on the tags, it takes us to the last commit in the Gatsby Remark Liquid tags, which is the commit that had this new file. And similarly, when we click on EaseGit, it takes us to the last commit that was made before we added the submodule to the Git project. And the last commit here was the modify configuration, something I did last year. So that's pretty much it. This is the project now. These are the submodules, and then these are the files of its own. Now let's say we're on a different device and we wanted to clone this project. Something interesting will happen, and let's look at how that works. So let's copy the remote URL. Back in our terminal, I'll go one step backward, git clone, and I'm going to call this to submodule tutorial. It's cloning. Then we change directory to our submodule tutorial, and we can view that on VS Code. Now here's something interesting. So we have our git modules file, which has the two git modules, meta information about the two git modules. We have our readme, but when we go to tags, we discover that tags is empty. Once we go to EaseGit, we discover that EaseGit is also empty. But when you go to Git, you notice that in the config file here, the config file has no information about the submodule. Not able to pull the Git submodules correctly. So now there are two ways to go about this. The first way to go about this is to add an extra option when cloning. So let's step backward a bit. I'm going to clear all of this. Let's step backward a bit. On my left here, I have the two submodule tutorial. Right here, I would go to my GitHub and I'll try to clone the repository again. Copy the. Instead of pasting it and stopping here, I'm going to add the recursive option. So what this recursive option does, it oh, that was a double hyphen. What am I missing out on? Okay, I have to give it a different name. So let's call this 3 submodule tutorial. It's clowning. Just as we can see here, submodule SJIT registered for this, submodule tags registered for this. Cloning into SJIT, cloning into tags. So the recursive helped us to also clone, just like JIT pool, it helped us to clone the submodules accordingly. So when we open that, so here's what we have. So we have the tags. The tags now is populated as we expected. The isGit directory is populated as we expected. And when we go to the Git and we check this config file, we would notice that the submodules were also added here as we expected. And this is the first way of doing it. Let's look at the second way. So in this directory, which does not have the submodules populated, there are two things we can do. The first thing we can do is git submodule init. And what this does is it goes into our git.git modules file, which is this, and then it's going to take this the way it is here, and it's coming to the config here to paste it like this. That's the only thing the command is doing. So we can test that out. I'm removing it. Git submodule init, enter. And then when we come back to the config, that was the only thing that the command did. But the command has not populated our isGit folder and the tags folder yet. So the next thing we need to do is git submodule update. So what this command does is it goes into our config file, the submodules that have been registered there, it's going to clone the submodules accordingly. And now when we go back to our IDE, we have the tags populated as we want, and we have the isGit populated as we want. Now there is you'll find this online a lot. The Git submodule init command looks irrelevant since it's only copying from the Git submodules and pasting in the config. But that's not all the Git submodule init does. And this is why the command is still relevant. Let's create another project directory. I'm going to clone this one more time. Git clone this for submodule tutorial. I'm not adding the recursive. And when I open it, okay, I wasn't supposed to open that, so I'm supposed to go into this and open. Now when I open it, as expected, the tags is empty, the isGit is empty, and the git config doesn't have the submodules yet. So this is why the git submodule init is relevant. I can come here, submodule init, and I can just initialize only the one for tags. I don't care about the one for isGit. And once you do that, in your Git config, you only have one for tags. So say you have many submodules and you only about 3 for a particular project you're working on. Instead of recursively cloning everything, you can use Git Submodule in it to pick just the one that you want, which is the tags. And now when I run Git Submodule update, it's only going to clone into tags, but it's not going to clone into the EaseJet. And there you have it. EaseJet is still not populated and tags is populated accordingly. So there you have it. Those are things to watch out for when you're cloning, because when you clone, Git doesn't do that for you. You have to either use the recursive option or you initialize and update every submodule, or you initialize and update only the specific ones that you care about. So far in this video, we have looked at how to create submodules, how to use submodules, and also how to clone projects with submodules. And then the last thing on our list is things to watch out for when using submodules. So in my experience, when I discovered how to use submodules, I was very happy. I started using it and I was able to extract all of my shared logic within these 3 projects, having them in my shared repository. That worked fine, but one thing that caught me unaware was I was working on private repositories because it was a private work, not something public. And I was hosting them on Heroku. Now Heroku and Vassal do not support private submodules. And that's the only caveat I found so far. They don't support private submodules. I either had to make the submodules public or I don't use them. They don't support that for now. Hopefully in the nearest future. I think Vassal has some plans of supporting that soon, but until then they do not support private submodules. So if you're using submodules, make sure they are public, else you won't be able to host it on these platforms. Maybe other platforms support them, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure if you're using your own platform, maybe like a DigitalOcean Droplet, you should be able to use submodules since you are the one performing the deployment on your own. But Vassal and Heroku does not do that, and that's the only caveat, that's the only thing to watch out for. So if you're using Git Submodules, make sure there are public projects. And that's it for Git Submodules. That's all I have for Git Submodules. There's actually a lot under Git Submodules. There are a lot of options. There are aside, apart from init, apart from update, apart from add, there are a lot of other options that can suit every of your other needs. But I believe that this video has given you a clear guide on what Git Submodules are, how to use Git Submodules, how to clone project with Git Submodules, and then one reason why you should subscribe to my channel. So thank you for watching. I hope you have learned a lot. If you really have, please share and subscribe if you haven't, and see you in my next video.